Well, I guess a few things. The pandemic, thankfully, is we're in a place where, by and large, the pandemic didn't impact us at all. Our business previously, a bit of the backstory is I've been doing this kind of work for about 15 years, following a successful career in marketing. But I was been doing this work. A lot of that time over the last decade was being had their own business, but it was a contracting for other companies. And it was really
Hmm.
about 5 years ago where we kind of went all in on establishing our company and our brand and our
Wow.
methodologies and whatnot. And I was still doing a lot of international travel, but with getting married, with getting home, with having kids, I wanted to be on the ground more. So it was really by coincidence, 2 months before COVID hit, made the decision to sever ties with other companies that was doing clients that were requiring me to travel internationally, and moved to a more online model. And so the timing couldn't have been better that way. Where we do all our marketing, we deliver our programs online. I'm on Zoom all the time, like most people, most business people
So
these
you were
days.
doing that before it was even required because of the pandemic.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. And that was a strategic decision. The way I kind of looked at it was, previous to that, I was doing a lot of work in corporations, live
Yep.
coaching, leadership development programs. And um, if I got real and I really did the leapfrog forward 15 years, I knew that I wasn't going to be building a sustainable business by having an old model of business development. Business development is the lifeline of business. And so by pounding the pavement and working my contacts and understanding who in the industry is around, you're always kind of chasing the next lead.
Yep.
And and I knew that for our business to really achieve the impact that we wanted to have, and us to achieve the success and the lifestyle that we wanted to have, we had to have an online first model. And we needed to have a following, an audience, a database of prospects, of customers. So that was very much a strategic decision. It's a long time coming, but it's definitely the right way. And like all business owners, we're still relatively in the early. I like to think in the early days, even though we've been doing it for a couple of decades. Still have the youthful enthusiasm of a newbie, and it's always a roller coaster. And the more you can ride that, rather than get
Yep.
thrown around by it, the more exciting it can be. Well, I'll even back it up even before then, because I think everyone who's a high performing athlete in university or beyond, they started their journey much
Much
earlier.
earlier.
And I
Yep.
think for me, the key distinction or key, I don't know, light bulb moment that kind of went off for me was, um, growing up in a town where a town and a school and a family and friends where I've never known anyone to achieve at a high level, to be an Olympian or a pro athlete. Never have any reference points for that. My view of the world was that high level successful people they come from other places, not
Hmm.
not from where I'm from, and therefore I can't do that, right? But then the light bulb went off, and I just realized, that is a limiting thought that I've got. It's a limiting perspective that I have, and if I'm above average athlete at 15, 16, 17, why couldn't I be above average at 21 and
Hmm.
25 and 30, right? So really a light bulb went off, and I said, you know what, I owe it to myself. I have a duty to myself to really pursue my potential, to see how far I can take this thing. And at the time I was playing all the traditional sports, right? Baseball, basketball, hockey, football, etc. And I decided, well, football seems to be the one where I might have a chance to go pro. And so I really pursued that. I kind of doubled down on that, started going to more camps, studying more, reading biographies of top athletes, not just in football, but beyond.
Yeah.
And through studying those professional athletes and Olympians, in fact, I got on my bookshelf over here, I just noticed the other day, Mark Tewksbury was the very
Yeah.
first athlete book I bought. It was in probably 1989, 1990, just before he broke through at the Barcelona Olympics or broke the world record. And it was still an inspiration to really understand how these elite athletes, people who are, on the world stage, achieving the world's best ever, it was eye-opening how they all talked about it wasn't the physical skills, it was the mindset.
Wow.
And very early on as a teenager, I learned that mindset. It's the when the game's on the line, it's the final 2 minutes, how optimism mattered, how focus mattered, how discipline and training mattered. All of those things were not physical traits. They were learnable skills that you can master. And if they can be learned, then I can learn them. And ever since I've been 17, I've been fascinated with mindset, peak performance psychology, sports psychology, understanding what really allows us to perform at our best when it matters most. And that goes for sport, for business, for life. And that's kind of been the foundation. And that got me on this path that has allowed me to succeed in university, but also then coach a lot as a mental conditioning coach a lot of athletes to help them perform at their best at world championships or get college scholarships or perform on the World Cup circuit. Yeah, I think Einstein said, right? If you're trying to if I had 1 hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes on defining the problem and 5 minutes on the solution. And I think too often people think what people perceive to be the problem is not the problem. So we spend a lot of time, energy, and money on trying to solve the problem. That's not the problem, wasting a lot of time. And so when you ask the question, what's the most important habit or what's a really valuable habit to bring discipline in? First, you got to get clear on, well, what's lacking? Where's the gap? And, in simple ways, I kind of look at it as there's two ways to go down if you want to build discipline. One is let's say the execution of discipline. So for example, real practical, most people in the business world today are now maybe a little bit, maybe not, depending on the environment they're in. Most people are meetinged out. I used to ask people in the workshops I did, I've asked this all around the world. I said, what percentage of your time, let's say a typical working week is spent in meetings or on emails? And largely people will say 85 to 90%, right? That's pretty just the way that we work, right? We're a digital world now. The follow-on question is, and what percentage of that time is spent effectively? And by and large, the average is usually about 25 to 30.
So you're wasting time.
And so it's a kind of a mic drop moment. It's like, well, shouldn't that be alarming that 85 to 90% of your time is spent 30% effectively, right? So discipline. Most people are meeting out, and one of the biggest complaints people have in the business world, corporate world, is that there are too many meetings that run too long, without an agenda, without focus, and without clear takeaways. We culturally in business, there are shining examples, but culturally in business, people lack a terrible amount of discipline in how to run an effective meeting. And so that might be one problem to look at, right? So the execution of the discipline might be, you can Google this, you'll get the clear answer, right? Yep. Start the meeting with an agenda, map it out, note takers, like all this stuff that everyone knows intellectually, but no one ever does. Yep. So there's flaws in that, right? Why? Because there's mindset issues, not the behavioral issues. But there are execution issues that there's low-hanging fruit that you can do, but there's a second lane for discipline. And it's not the discipline of the execution of the meeting. It's what's going to set you up to run an effective meeting. What's the discipline you need to do to prepare for a meeting, to plan for a meeting? I'll give you a really simple example. When I used to run a team of 18 people, which is not huge for a lot of corporations, but I created this little habit that, you go into Outlook or whatever software you use, and you invite, the first thing you do is you invite all the people, and then you give it a subject line, and you pick a date and a time, and you go send, right? And most people will say, oh yeah, we'll accept it. But people don't know really what the point of the meeting is. So I created a little habit to say, the first thing I need to do is, who do I need there? What's the title? But the first thing I do in that text box that people don't usually fill in is,
amazing.
The purpose of this meeting is, not the agenda. What's the outcome? What's the goal? What's the purpose of this meeting? Beautiful. The purpose of this meeting is, and I'd sit back and I'd think, what is the purpose, Chris? And I'll tell you, about 20 to 30% of the time, I'd be like,
you wouldn't make the meeting.
That person doesn't need to be there. Exactly. That person doesn't need to be there. I need to talk one-on-one with that person, or I need to scrap this meeting, right? Suddenly freed up 20% of my time. And then I would go to what's the agenda. Then I would say, what do you need to prepare? And that little discipline made my meetings way more effective, use less time, and better, clearer outcomes. The first thing that comes to my mind is in athletics, you can't escape failure.
It's
Right?
inevitable. Yeah.
It's inevitable. And failure, right? It's a loss of a game. It's going through a slump, whatever it might be. You could call it failure. Maybe it's not failure, but you don't succeed the way you wanted to, right? You don't produce the results that you want. But not only is it inevitable, but you often, certainly in the course of a season, don't have much time to, cry in the corner about it because the next game is coming up, right? The next match is coming up. You got to dust yourself off pretty quickly. So I think that's one thing one big lesson is that I think people that really struggle, whether it's sports, business, life, people that really struggle, if you really got inside their head, they're probably focusing more on what didn't go right than what could go right next time. And as I like to say, we're focused, what you focus on expands. Yep. And so if you're feeling that you're surrounded by, or you are nothing but a failure, this company's always failing, you got to really check yourself to say, where am I putting my attention and energy? Is it on all the problems that are happening, or am I trying to look at solutions or find solutions, right? So I think that's the one thing is you don't have the option other than bounce back. So the bounce back ability from a failure, I think, is one big thing that sports
which is another skill I think everybody should be learning and practicing.
Yeah. And it's no different in business. You could have a failed product launch. You could have a failed employee. You could have a failed financial year, and you can, fall into a pit and, go into a dark place about it, or you can really look hard at the lessons. And I think that's the other thing I would say is that, looking back to the past, obviously you can't change the past, but you can look for the lessons. And I think when, in sports, the analogy might be looking back at the film from the previous competition and analyze what you could have done differently and take that lesson forward. And the same thing in business, right? You finish the end of a project. Did it go well? Didn't it go well? Didn't matter. Let's do a little post-mortem. Let's understand what are the lessons we can take forward to the next one. And unfortunately, too many businesses, because of the pace the world is working at and the demands that are happening and the influx of information coming at us, people don't have the discipline. Organizations don't have the discipline to pause and look back. Too busy moving on to the next thing. And there's so many valuable lessons that could literally put a company on a different trajectory if they took the time to really evaluate that. And people say, I don't have the time, but if you don't have the time, then you're not going to have the results. I think executives need to, first and foremost, be executives of themselves. I think they need to develop good habits, good practices to enable themselves to be at their best. And that's a combination of some daily disciplines and rituals. It's a combination of taking care of yourself physically, back to fundamentals, right? Strip it back. Are you sleeping well?
Are you eating well? Are you working out?
Are you setting yourself up for success? Are you owning the first hour to 90 minutes of your day to set yourself up for success? I often say you don't see LeBron James rock up to the side of the court with a Starbucks in his hand 5 minutes before the game starts, right? Professional athletes, the world's best, they're preparing in advance for the day, right? Executives show up with a Starbucks and some donut thinking I'm going to fuel myself this way and I'm going to think clearly for the next 12 hours. Not a chance.
No.
So you got to take care of yourselves. And I think the second thing I would say is you got to get to know what your team really, really needs and to not, actions are louder than words. You've got to demonstrate as a leader. You got to set the tone in your team by being a role model first and foremost. And if you don't know how to do that, you've got to get a coach, a mentor. You got to get some development of yourself. That's really going to make the difference for you and your team. It's a difficult time if you tell yourself it's a difficult time, right? And every downturn in the world in history, if you in the business world specifically, in the depressions and the recessions is where some of the greatest companies on earth have been built. So there's tons of opportunity out there. I think the second thing is you got to own your own mindset, right? You got to work on the mindset of your own confidence. And especially if you're starting out. And I think the last thing I would say is, and I hear this all the time from my peers who are leading, managing, hiring. people out of school now is you got to be willing to do the work. You got to be willing to put in the effort and then get the rewards. Too many people, that's a whole other conversation, but too many people are coming into the workforce with a bit of entitlement that, hey, I've done one good thing, so now I should be director of this division. It's just not the way it works. That's not the way it works. I am genuinely concerned about many organizations and many businesses and many people entering the community now, entering the workforce now, of how, what kind of a leader are they going to be in 15 years?
Yeah.
Because if they're not willing to understand what true leadership is, what it truly takes to be successful and looking for the quick fix, they're going to be greatly disappointed.